Tensions erupt across the Middle East after Israel launches a wide-scale preemptive strike on Iran. Iran has now closed its airspace until further notice. Iranian state TV confirms a new blast at Natanz this morning. The country's air defense is fully activated. Civilian areas in Tehran were also struck. State media reports women and children killed. Earlier explosions were heard across Tehran and at the Natanz uranium enrichment facility, which was reportedly hit several times. Air raid sirens were activated in Tehran and several Iranian cities following Israeli airstrikes as air defenses responded to incoming threats. Let's listen in. Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed in an official statement that Israel launched Operation Rising Lion to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat. He said they struck key sites including Natanz, nuclear scientists, and missile programs. The operation will continue as needed. Here's what the Israeli Prime Minister has said.
Months ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program.
On the military front, Israel's military says it has completed the first stage of its assault, targeting dozens of military and nuclear sites. Among those reportedly killed is Iran's Revolutionary Guard's Chief Hossein Salami and top nuclear scientists. Israel is calling it a historic campaign unlike any other. Army Chief Eyal Zamir warns of a strong Iranian response, saying absolute success cannot be promised. Here's what the Israeli Chief of General Staff had to say.
אזרחי ישראל, אינני מבטיח לכם רק הצלחות. המשטר האיראני ינסה לפגוע בנו בחזרה. הספיגה צפויה להיות שונה מזו שהורגלנו אליה. צה"ל נערך למתן הגנה מרבית לעורף הישראלי, ואני קורא לכם לגלות אחריות אישית, משפחתית וקהילתית ולהישמע להוראות.
Meanwhile, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz also commented, saying that the country is at a critical juncture and warned that failing to act now means losing the chance to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Here's what he has said. Iran state media also reports civilians, including women and children, were killed in strikes on residential areas in Tehran. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei stated that Israel's attacks expose its vile nature, adding that the assault has sealed a bitter fate for Israel, which it will be inevitably facing. Global leaders are urging calm after Israel strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. The UN chief called for maximum restraint, warning of a deepening conflict. Iran claims the U.S. backed the attack, but U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio denied any involvement, stressing protection of American forces. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong said the escalation is alarming and risks regional instability. New Zealand's Prime Minister called it unwelcome, warning of miscalculation. Japan's top spokesman pledged diplomatic efforts to calm tensions. The message from world capitals is clear: avoid war, restore dialogue, and prevent further regional chaos. Now we have guest Daniel Wagner. He's a CEO of Country Risk Solutions. He's joining us live from Colorado, US. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What does Israel's Operation Rising Lion signal about its strategic intentions towards Iran's nuclear program, according to you?
We have to remember that for Israel, this is an existential threat. So the US, for example, is very far away. For the US, it's a question of avoiding a nuclear proliferation among the other Middle Eastern powers that might be inclined to do so if Iran got a nuclear weapon. But for Israel, it's very much a question of does it exist or does it not if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. So, the markets are going to be inclined to have sharp declines in the next 24 hours. But my view is that if Israel is successful, they should actually be rising, because that implies that there's much less of a chance that there will be nuclear proliferation among many of the Middle Eastern nations.
And building on that, Daniel, how significant is the strike on Natanz, and what does it mean for Iran's nuclear capabilities going forward?
So the Israelis, of course, knew that much of Iran's nuclear infrastructure is buried pretty far beneath the surface of the country. So they had to use sufficient firepower to be able to disable that. I suspect that those bombs were actually coming from the US, since I don't think Israel can make it themselves. That all said, I don't think they would undertake such an operation unless they had that sufficient firepower. And my guess is that for each of these cities where they are and sites where they have applied these strikes, that they will have done a sufficient job, or at least as an opening salvo, to disable the ability of the Iranians to retaliate. Let's not forget that in previous strikes a few months ago, that's exactly what the Israelis did. They disabled the ability of the Iranians to retaliate. And my suspicion is that that would have been a sort of the first strike for the Israelis, or perhaps similarly at the same time that they struck the actual facilities, maybe do another blow against the air retaliation capabilities.
And now that the global diplomatic responses were pouring in, do you think calling for maximum restraint is adequate for stopping regional war?
Well, I think that most of the world's powers are going to be clapping behind the scenes that this has finally happened. Let's not forget that the Israelis have wanted to do this for many years, and the Biden administration wouldn't let them do it for at least the last 4 years. So with the negotiations going on with the Trump administration, one could have said this was slightly premature. Let's wait for the outcome and see what happens with the negotiating process. But my sense is that if the Israelis went ahead and did this, then behind the scenes it must have been pretty clear that those negotiations were either going nowhere or were going to lead to some sort of a stalemate or the place that they were before. And the Israelis, of course, then would be asking themselves, well, what good does that do? It's just a question of time until they build their forces up, the Iranians. And the Iranians, of course, have cheated numerous times on the JCPOA. So question being, were the Israelis supposed to wait until this was just another matter of time, until they had to act years from now? And I think they said, well, we can't afford to do that. That's why they did what they did.
And what are the implications for U.S. troop stations in close by regions like Iraq and Syria and the Gulf if hostilities intensify?
I don't think there's any question that the Iranians are going to presume that the Americans are certainly aligned with the Israelis and perhaps even gave them the weapons to do this attack. So I've got to think that the American troops and the American bases throughout the Middle East are going to be at risk. And that is the reason, I presume also, that the Americans and the Brits and some other countries basically said all non-essential personnel should leave the embassies, and they put their military bases on high alert in recent days.
And how might this affect other regional flashpoints like Hezbollah in Lebanon or Houthis in Yemen? Are we looking at a multi-phased front escalation?
I doubt it. Let's not forget that the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, they've all been neutered by recent Israeli attacks in the previous months. That all being said, it's part of a grand calculation, I would argue, that the Israelis made. Basically, weaken the Iranian proxies first, then go after the head of the snake, if you will. And that's exactly what they appear to have done.
Thank you very much, Daniel Wagner, for joining us and bringing your expertise to our channel. Now we move on to our next story. A deadly air disaster in India has